At Starbound, we tell stories the human way, not with artificial voices or AI slop. In the end, what's HFI without humanity? Subscribe to keep it this way. My name's I Am Duck. Let's begin. Do you see anything? Corporal Anna Matson's voice was a low murmur in Sergeant Samir Rhodes' ear, a sound set against the jungle's layers of clicks and hums. Rhodes kept his rifle scope pressed to his eye, sweeping it across the wall of green. Just a whole lot of reasons to hate planets with this much chlorophyll. He lowered the weapon, the faint hum of its systems dying. When he looked, the scene was a dizzying tapestry. A dozen shades of jade, emerald, and lime vied for space on a single broad-leafed fern. The bark of a towering cypress analog was a fractured mosaic of mossy green and ash grey. An insect with a glossy shell that shifted through a slick of oily purples and greens crawled up its trunk. Rhodes felt the hairs on his neck prickle under Vaux's unseen gaze. The Calyptian hunt leader stood motionless, his frame all long limbs and coiled strength, at ease in the oppressive heat, his moss-green fur looking damp in the humidity, merged with the jungle. Vaux stood so still the dim light pooled on his large, unblinking amber eyes. "Your machine reveals little, Sergeant Rhodes," Vaux spoke in a resonant, steady pitch, a predator certain of its dominance. "It sees heat, hunt leader," Rhodes replied, keeping his gaze forward. "And right now, everything is hot. The ground, the trees, my temper." A low chuffing sound, the Calyptian equivalent of a chuckle, came from the Vaux's second, Rax. Vaux's expression remained a fixed mask. He pointed a three-fingered hand, claws retracted towards a patch of dense undergrowth 50 meters away. "And you, what do you perceive with your shell sight?" Rhodes scanned the area quarter by quarter. Trees, vines, dirt, a few rocks that looked like snakes. The usual. Vaux took a measured step forward, his body coiling and uncoiling like a great cat. "Curious." He tilted his head. "My senses tell a different story. I see the Titanwood's vibrant life glow, its sap pulsing warmly beneath the bark. I see the strangler vine's cooler, more sluggish energy coiled around it. 3 small furred creatures are sleeping in a hollow 20 feet up, their bodies blazing. Miniature suns in the hollow. And there," he pointed to the ground Rhodes had dismissed as dirt, "I see the faint fading spoor of a shimmer-scaled lizard. A predator passed this way perhaps 4 hours ago. A phenomenal mist, a ghost of its passage. It still hangs in the air." Private Jenks, the rookie point man, shifted his weight. The 19-year-old looked his age, his face still holding a softness that this place would eventually scour away. "He can see smells," he whispered. "He sees biological processes," Madsen corrected in a low voice. "Pheromones are complex molecules. They radiate a faint heat as they break down, a signature his senses can parse as a sense shape." Vaux flicked his gaze to them. He offered a smile, a stretching of lips that offered no warmth. "Your medic is astute. We see the world as it truly is, a symphony of life, far beyond a flat painting of surfaces and textures," Rax commented in their clicking, resonant tongue. Vaux's smile widened. "Rax finds your condition amusing. He says it must be like living in a shadow play. To be so blind to the world of life, to need a machine to see the warmth of a living thing." A muscle jumped in Jenks' jaw. Rhodes put a hand on his shoulder. He looked Vaux square in the eye. "We see what we need to see." The joint patrol was a political fiction, a flimsy bandage over the gaping wound left by the Silvus dispute. The planet was a scientific preserve in name only. In truth, a reserve-rich prize that both the human colonial authority and the Calyptian dominion coveted. These patrols were a way for each side to make a show of force without starting a war. "Indeed," Vaux said. He turned and signaled his 5 hunters to move out. "Let us continue our walk." As the team fell into formation, Jenks moved up to take point. He took 2 steps before Rhodes shot his arm out, grabbing the front of his vest and yanking him back so hard his helmet clanked against his rifle. "Hey!" Jenks stumbled, catching his balance. Rhodes stayed silent. He just pointed. 3 feet from where Jenks's boot would have landed stood a tree. To a casual glance, it resembled any other. But its bark was a peculiar shade of red. Its color was a deep Venice shade, with its own shadows. "Crimson weep," Rhodes said, his voice flat. "Stay clear of it. Even breathing on it is dangerous. The sap is a cytotoxic neurotoxin. It'll feel like you're dissolving from the inside out." Jenks went stark white. It blended right in." "I know," Rhodes said. "That's why I'm here." He glanced back. Vo paused, watching them. The Calyptian tilted his head again in that curious way. He was observing Rhodes's reaction to the tree's color, filing it away as another bizarre human quirk, a superstition born from their flawed senses. To his life sight, the tree was another healthy organism, its life aura bright. His senses registered the tree's vitality, while the poison in its veins remained hidden from his perception. Rhodes met his gaze for a long moment, then nodded his team forward, making a wide detour around the deadly plant. On a world like Silver's, Vo's arrogant ignorance would be a death sentence. They marched for another hour before a sound alien to the jungle cut through the oppressive heat. A sharp, coded burst of static in their encrypted comms. Specialist Anton Baker, the team's heavy weapons and comms man, stopped dead. Baker was built like a cargo hauler, solid and economical in his movements. When he froze, everything else did too. He tilted his helmet, listening to the data squawk only he could receive. His stoic expression tightened. "Sarge?" His voice was a low rumble. "Flash from command. Priority Alpha." Rhodes was at his side instantly. "Report." "Talks are dead. Calyptian fleet just jumped in system. They're blockading the planet. Treaties void. Command says the whole thing was a setup. All HCA assets ought to consider themselves behind enemy lines." A setup. The patrol was a trap. They were bait. Before Rhodes could even process the chain of implications, Vo stiffened. The hunt leader had a receiver pressed to the side of his skull. Vo fixed Rhodes with his gaze. His calm expression shattered, a cold look of triumph replacing it. Vo lowered his hand. He raised his plasma rifle. Its bioengineered design, a stark contrast to the human weapons blocky functionality. His 5 hunters raised their rifles as one, in perfect silence. "The Dominion now reclaims this preserve as its territory," Vo announced. "By the clan's order, you will surrender your weapons, humans. Your blindness is irrelevant to your trespass." He considered and discarded a dozen tactical scenarios. He immediately discarded surrender. They would become political pawns at best, dissected curiosities at worst. He had one contingency, a last-ditch plan for exactly this kind of betrayal. He locked eyes with Baker. "Judas," Rhodes said, the word sharp and clear in the sudden quiet. Baker's thumb slammed a button on his wrist console. A high-frequency shriek erupted from a small device they had planted 1/2 kilometer back along their trail. The shriek, turned to the upper registers of Calyptian hearing, was an agonizing, disorienting scream, a sound at the edge of human hearing. All 6 Calyptians flinched. Vo roared in pain, dropping to one knee and pressing his hands to the sides of his head. His hunters staggered, their weapons wavering. "Go!" Rhodes' yell cut through the chaos. "Break left! Full sprint!" Team Mustang crashed through the undergrowth, leaving the reeling Calyptians behind them. The jungle, once their cage, was now their only hope for cover. They ran. Vines tore at their armor. Razor-edged leaves sliced at exposed skin. and the thick, muddy ground tried to suck the boots from their feet. Rhodes set a punishing pace. The frantic thud of his own heart, a drumbeat in his ears, the sound of Vo's enraged bellows echoing behind them. After 10 minutes, lungs burning, he called a halt, pulling the team into the cover of a thicket of gigantic stalks that wept spores. "Report!" he gasped, leaning against a fleshy purple stem. "All present," Madsen said, her breathing heavy but controlled. She was already checking Jenks, who looked like he was about to vomit inside his helmet. "Comms?" Rhodes asked Baker. "Jamming. Hard. They're blanketing the spectrum." Baker slammed a fist against his oversized comms pack. "We're cut off." "Figures." Rhodes pulled out his mud-caked tablet, its inch-thick armored casing cold in his numb fingers. He swiped the screen, bringing up the thermal overlay. His stomach churned. On the flickering grid, 6 bright, burning signatures were closing on their position, moving through the trees above the ground. "They're in the canopy," he hissed, "moving 3 times our speed." "How are they tracking us so fast?" Jenks panted, his expression stark. "We're leaving a faint trail." "We might as well be," Madsen said, looking at the tablet over Rhodes' shoulder. "We're bleeding heat. To them, we're probably leaving a glowing trail a mile wide. We're fireflies running through a dark room." A plasma bolt sizzled through the air, inches from Jenks' head. It struck a spore-bearing stalk, which exploded in a shower of pulpy, foul-smelling gore. A sleek figure with mossy fur dropped from the canopy above, landing in a silent crouch. The figure was Rax. He held a vibro-glaive in one hand, its blade humming with energy. He was 20 meters away, a feral grin on his face. "You're trapped, shell sights," he snarled. Baker brought his heavy pulse cannon up, a weapon designed to chew through light vehicle armor, and unleashed a volley of suppressing fire. The air filled with the weapon's roar and the concussive thumps of plasma impacts. He targeted the trees around Rax. Bark and splinters flew as he tore a destructive line through the canopy. Rax, his grin vanishing, leapt 20 feet straight up into the canopy, vanishing from view. "Move!" Rhodes yelled, shoving Jenks forward. "Now!" The pursuit resumed. Plasma bolts from the canopy herded them. The Calyptians were toying with them. Their movement through the trees and their heat vision gave them an overwhelming advantage. They were too fast. Every step they took, every bead of sweat that ran down their faces, it was a beacon for the hunters in the trees. They were leaving a trail of heat and motion that the Calyptians could follow from a kilometer away, running only burnt energy. They had to change the rules. Ahead, through a gap in the trees, the rush of water reached them. A river, a cold, fast-flowing river, judging by the sound. A cold, logical idea formed. Thermal trails. The Calyptians were following their thermal trails. "This way," he commanded, changing direction abruptly and crashing toward the sound. They burst from the tree line onto a bank of smooth grey stones. A wide, turbulent river churned past, its water the color of polished granite and undoubtedly frigid, fed by mountain meltwater. "Sarge! What?" Jenks started. "In," Rhodes ordered in full stride as he waded into the churning current. The cold shock was brutal, stealing his breath. Madsen followed right behind him, with Baker, his jaw set. Jenks hesitated for a second on the bank, looking back at the dark jungle. "Jenks, now!" Madsen's voice was sharp. "Move your ass!" The kid swore and plunged in after them. The river's roar swallowed his gasp of shock. The water was a torment. It soaked through their fatigues instantly, leaching warmth from their bodies. The current was strong, tugging at their legs, trying to pull them under. Rhodes ground his teeth against the cold, forcing himself forward, angling them downstream. "Stay close," he yelled over the noise. "Use your rifles for balance." They stumbled through the water until the cold sank deep into their bones, and every muscle screamed. Rhodes kept his gaze on the far bank, pushing them for a full kilometer downstream before he judged it safe. He spotted what he was looking for, a place where the jungle grew thick, right down to the water's edge, overshadowed by a rocky cliff face from which a small waterfall spilled down, creating a curtain of spray. There, he pointed, behind the falls. They scrambled from the river, teeth chattering uncontrollably, and pushed through the curtain of water. Behind it lay a shallow cove, eroded into the rock face. It offered meager shelter, but it concealed them. Rhodes collapsed against the damp rock wall, racked with shivers. He pulled out his tablet, his numb fingers fumbling with the controls. He switched to the thermal view. On the screen, 6 Calyptium signatures appeared, milling about on the riverbank a kilometer upstream, exactly where the team had entered the water. The Calyptiums moved back and forth, their movements uncertain. The humans' glowing trail had led them to the water's edge and then vanished. Rhodes allowed himself a grim, shaky smile. The river had washed their heat away, masking them completely. We did it! Jenks breathed, his voice a tremor. We actually did it! They'd bought themselves time. Hours, maybe, but as the adrenaline faded, the profound, bone-deep chill set in. The cave was a cramped, damp sanctuary. The waterfall's rhythmic drumming masked any sound they made, a constant percussion as they tended to their gear in silence. Status, Rhodes said, his voice raspy. He was fighting to control his shivering. Everyone's intact, Madsen reported, her own teeth chattering. She was already digging through her med kit, pulling out thermal blankets and high-energy ration bars. But we're all on the express train to hypothermia. We need to get dry and get warm, fast. She tossed a blanket to each of them. Strip off the wet gear, now. Survival trumped modesty. They stripped down to their underlayers, the air in the cave feeling shockingly warm against their chilled skin. Baker had already cracked open 2 chemical heating packs, their warmth spreading across the small space. Jenks tried to hide the violent tremor in his hands as he fumbled with the wrapper on his ration bar. Rhodes wrapped the thin thermal blanket around his shoulders and laid out the situation. All right, listen up. Comms are out. The Calyptiums have the orbital high ground and they're actively hunting us. Our mission parameters are void. Our new objective is survival, evasion, and extraction. He pulled up a map on his tablet, the battery indicator blinking in the red zone. He zoomed in on a sector 50 kilometers to the northeast. This is our target, he said, pointing to a flat-topped mesa that rose sharply from the jungle floor. It's marked Emergency Extraction Point Cairn, codename The Bench. It's an old survey site, pre-treaty, defensible, clear landing zone. If there's any HCA rescue operation, that's where they'll look first. 50 clicks? Jenks' voice was thin. True dat? With them out there? They can track our heat, Sarge, Madsen added. The river trick is a temporary solution. Once we're back in the jungle, we'll stand out like torches. Rhodes looked past them, through the waterfall's shimmering veil, at the endless, hostile green beyond. He thought of Vaux's smug confidence, his smug certainty in his life-sight's superiority. He remembered the crimson weep tree, a deadly trap that was a blind spot in his life sight, but was plain as day to him. They see heat, Rhodes said, the words measured. They see the life glow. They see the energy. But Vaux said it himself, to them our world is a shadow play, a flat painting. He looked at each of them in turn. Color is their blind spot. They hear the symphony, but are blind to the sheet music. We're going to use that. Jenks stared at him, confused. Use what, Sarge? The color green. Every color, Rhodes said. We're going to use millennia of human evolution to survive. We're going to show them what true sight is. Their first lesson in the art of seeing came a few hours later, after the cold's worst edge had subsided and their limbs had regained some warmth. Their standard rations were limited. and a 50-kilometer trek required fuel. Madsen led them to a patch of low-lying shrubs just outside the cave, their branches heavy with clusters of small, purple berries. "Sylvian nightberries," she said, plucking one and holding it up. "High in carbs and electrolytes, exactly what we need." She then plucked another berry from an adjacent bush. To Rhodes it looked identical, and this is a mock nightshade. Looks the same, has a similar life aura, according to the xenobotany reports, but it's a powerful emetic. Eat a handful of these and you'll be puking your guts out for 12 hours, a terrible state to be in when you're on the run. "So how do we tell them apart?" Jenks asked, squinting at the two berries in her palm. "Look closer," Madsen instructed. "The nightberry is a consistent deep purple. The mock nightshade, see that? It has a faint bluish tint to the skin, almost a sheen, like a tiny hint of cobalt mixed in with the violet." They all leaned in. She was right. Once you saw it, the difference was obvious. A subtle difference in you. The difference between a life-saving meal and a debilitating sickness. The Calyptium's life site would register them as identical. "Jenks," Rhodes ordered. "You've got the youngest eyes. You're on berry duty. Check every one." The kid nodded, his face set in concentration as he began sorting their meal, berry by berry. The second test came as they prepared to move out. They needed to find a place to rest for the next cycle, a defensible position to observe their hunters. Rhodes traced the patterns of vegetation on a nearby cliff face. Most vegetation was a slick, generic green moss, but on one section beneath a wide overhang, the moss had a different quality. He pointed. "There, we'll rest. There." "What's special about it?" Madsen asked. "Look at the pattern on the growth," he said. "It's a variegated green. There are subtle streaks of yellow in it, almost ochre. That's iron root growth. It only grows on stable, solid rock. Its root systems go deep. That overhang will hold." Before they left the river, Rhodes sent up his microdrone, a tiny insect-like device with a powerful optical zoom. He guided it high into the canopy, a risky move that could give away their position if detected. He found the Calyptians. Vo paced, his movements jerky with rage. His full hunting party was there now, a dozen of them. He'd called in his flankers. They were spreading out, sweeping the jungle with wide area thermal scans. The humans' trail had gone cold at the river, and Vo's arrogant assumption that they would blunder into the jungle's many hazards had failed him. Vo gave an order, his gestures sharp. The hunters fanned out. Rhodes watched the drone feed. Vo was compensating for his blind spot with numbers and technology. He still looked for heat, for life, for the obvious signals. He ignored the world itself. That arrogance, Rhodes thought as he recalled the drone, would be his undoing. Jenks took point. He moved differently now, channeling his nervous energy into a constant scan of their surroundings. As he flicked his gaze from vine to leaf to patch of soil. 2 hours into their trek, he froze mid-step, raising one hand in a fist. "Hold!" he whispered into his helmet mic. Rhodes moved up beside him. "What is it?" "The ground," Jenks said, his voice tight. "There, 10 meters ahead." Rhodes looked. The jungle floor was a loamy, mulch-covered patchwork of browns and blacks. He was about to tell Jenks to move on, but the kid's posture was rigid, certain. "The color," Jenks insisted. "It's wrong. It's a patch of dirt, but the shade of brown. It's too uniform, too sandy. It lacks the rich tones of the surrounding soil." Rhodes raised his binoculars, focusing on the spot. Jenks was right. A circular patch about 2 meters in diameter lay ahead. The texture and color were just slightly off, a detail he had missed. He cross-referenced the image with the xenobiology files on his tablet. A match came up almost instantly. "Goddamn, kid," Rhodes breathed. "That's a sandflapper burrow." He showed the file to the team. The sand flapper was a large ambush predator that buried itself just below the surface. It only attacked if stepped on, ejecting a massive cloud of fine silicate particles from its back. The cloud was intensely irritating to most respiratory systems and would cause temporary blindness. A slow smile spread across Rhodes' face as he read the entry's final line. Ejected particle cloud matches the ambient temperature, masking it from standard thermal imaging. They backtracked, found the wide trail the main Calyptian force was leaving, and paralleled it until they were ahead of them. Finding another sand flapper burrow directly in the hunter's path took little time. They worked in tense silence. Madsen's hands remained steady as she rigged a simple tripwire using a thin camouflaged filament connected to a small pebble. The pebble, when pulled, would drop onto the burrow center, provoking the creature within. They retreated to a ridge overlooking the trail and waited. 10 minutes later, 2 Calyptian scouts appeared, moving with an unnerving swiftness. They were scanning the canopy, the ground, their senses attuned to the world of heat and life. They ignored the subtle discoloration of the forest floor. The lead scout snagged the filament with his foot. The pebble dropped. For a second, all was still. Then the ground erupted. A huge, rolling cloud of brown dust burst upwards, enveloping the first Calyptian. He screamed, a high-pitched shriek of surprise and pain, clawing at his face as he inhaled the silicates. He stumbled back, choking and blind, crashing into his partner. The second scout, confused by his comrade's sudden distress, raised his rifle, spinning around to find an empty patch of jungle. From the ridge, Rhodes watched the chaos on his thermal display. The blinded Calyptian was a frantic, glowing shape, flailing inside a clout that his thermal display registered only as empty air. His partner spun in place, a glowing, confused shape. "Let's go," Rhodes murmured. They slipped away into the jungle, leaving the Calyptians to deal with the threat beyond their senses. Night fell on Silvis in a slow wash of color. The setting sun painted the sky in hues of violet and burnt orange, and as the light faded, the jungle came alive with a different kind of illumination. Luminous flora cast blue and green light onto the forest floor, guiding nocturnal pollinators. Flocks of insects pulsed with soft yellow mating signals as they flew. The world became one of cold, living light, a stark contrast to the world of heat the Calyptians perceived. Rhodes and Madsen shared the last watch, perched on a rocky outcrop that gave them a clear view of the valley below. Baker and Jenks slept, wrapped in their thermal blankets in a small, dry alcove. Madsen was tending to a long scratch on Rhodes' forearm, a souvenir from their earliest scramble. He moved with a gentle surety. "You're thinking about Tarek," she said. Rhodes stayed silent for a moment, watching a vine pulse with a soft silver light. He remembered their last mission, a desert world where a solar flare had fried all their tech. The flare left them blind, deaf, and lost. Tarek, their comm specialist, had walked right into a predator's den they should have seen. "His loss was a tech failure, Samir," Madsen murmured, applying a sealant patch to the scratch. "The gear failed. We all relied on it." "That's the point," Rhodes said, his voice low and hard. "We relied on it. We trusted the machine over our own eyes. Vo, he's making the same mistake. He trusts his life sight so completely. He's blind to its flaws. He assumes his life sight can detect any threat." Madsen finished her work and sat back, following his gaze out over the glowing landscape. The colors were mesmerizing, 1,000 points of living light against the deep black of the jungle. "You know," she said thoughtfully, "I think he's barely seeing this world at all. He's just reading data. Heat pheromones, life signs. It's all just information to him, a series of blinking lights on a screen." She turned and met his gaze in the dim, multicolored light. "You," she told him, "are actually looking, and that's why we're still alive." By the third day, Team Mustang were ghosts, They used color to navigate, find food, and predict hazards, leaving the Calyptians frustrated and confused. A deep ravine blocked their route to the bench. The only way forward was a long detour to the south, or a shortcut through a dense thicket that lay directly ahead. A Calyptian patrol had positioned itself to intercept them if they took the long way around. The thicket was their only real choice. Rhodes studied it through his binoculars. A wall of green confronted them, a seemingly uniform expanse of broad-leafed plants, but to his eyes it formed a mosaic of different shades. "Glass vine," he said, lowering the optics. Jenks paled. They had all read the briefing on glass vine. Microscopic silicate barbs covered the plant's leaves. The slightest touch would embed hundreds of them in the skin, causing an intense, burning pain that could incapacitate a soldier for hours. The barbs were also laced with a mild cytotoxic agent, ensuring the agony lingered. "We have to go through it," Jenks asked, his voice barely a whisper. "We do," Rhodes confirmed. "But look closely." He handed the binoculars to the kid. "Tell me what you see." Jenks scanned the thicket for a long moment. "It's green." "What kind of green?" Rhodes prompted. "Look at the different vines." Jenks was quiet for another moment. "Some of them are a brighter green, like new leaves. Others are darker, more of an olive color." "Exactly," Rhodes said. "The xenobotany report said the bulbs are only present on new growth. The bright green vines will shred us. The mature olive-colored vines are harmless. There's a path through. We just have to tell the difference between a dozen nearly identical shades of green." They moved in a single file, Rhodes leading them on a serpentine path through the deadly foliage. Every brush of a leaf against their armor made them flinch. The air was still, the only sound their own ragged breathing. A single mistake would mean crippling pain and certain capture. They emerged on the other side, drained, but whole, the concentration having exhausted them. Rhodes looked back at the deadly thicket. A tactical thought surfaced. "Baker," he said, "give me the noisemaker." Baker handed him a small flat disc. Rhodes set it to mimic the sound of a snapping branch, activated the timer, and tossed it deep into the glass vine. Then they moved away, finding cover in a rocky outcrop. A few minutes later, a two-hunter Calyptian patrol appeared at the thicket's edge. They moved cautiously, their attention focused on their thermal scanners. The noisemaker went off. The Calyptians heard their prey stumbling through the foliage. Their life sight showed them a uniform wall of healthy living plants. The lead hunter, with a bark to his comrade, plunged straight into the glass vine. His scream was immediate and horrifying. He thrashed, trying to escape, but only entangled himself further, his every movement bringing him into contact with more of the agonizing barbs. The other hunter, seeing his comrade fall, charged in to help him. Their howls of pain and surprise echoed through the jungle. Rhodes gave the signal and turned away. Team Mustang slipped away, leaving the hunters. Their path was forcing them into more and more dangerous terrain. To make up for lost time, they had to cross a deep chasm. A single massive tree had fallen across it generations ago, its moss-covered trunk forming a natural, treacherous bridge. This was their only way across. Madsen went first, then Jenks, then Baker, with Rhodes taking the rear. The log was slick with moisture, and a fall meant a 100-meter drop to the jagged rocks below. They were halfway across when the ambush was sprung. Two Calyptian hunters appeared on the far side of the chasm, blocking their path. Two more materialized on the side they had just left, sealing their escape. They were exposed on the narrow bridge. Jenks, startled, lost his footing. He yelped as his boots slipped on the slick moss, and his balance gave way. Baker moved. He dropped his massive pulse cannon and pack. He shot out one arm, clamping his hand onto the back of Jenks's vest, with bruising force, halting his fall. With his other hand, he grabbed onto a knob of wood on the log. His muscles bulged. straining against the combined weight. The lead Calyptian on their side charged, seeing this opportunity. He sprinted across the log, his vibroglaive held high. He was agile, balanced, a creature born to this kind of environment. Baker planted his feet. A solid wall of a man. He focused past the hunter's weapon, bracing for impact. At the final moment, as the Calyptian swung his glaive, Baker pivoted his hips and slammed his shoulder into the hunter's side. Simple physics took over. The Calyptian's forward momentum combined with a powerful and unexpected shove to his side on the narrow, slick surface rendered his agility useless. He yelled in surprise as he lost his footing. He windmilled his arms for a frantic second before gravity took him, and he disappeared into the chasm with a fading scream. The second Calyptian on their side hesitated at the unexpected brutality of the move. Rhodes and Madsen, who had already brought their rifles up, fired in unison. 2 blue stun bolts slammed into the Calyptian's chest, and he collapsed on the ravine's edge. Baker, grunting with effort, hauled a pale and trembling Jenks back onto the log. He picked up his gear and nodded for them to continue. The remaining Calyptians on the far side, seeing their odds violently shift, retreated back into the jungle. Team Mustang hurried across the bridge, their hearts pacing. They saw it. The bench. A high, flat-topped mesa rising from the jungle. A stone island in a green ocean. The mesa stood 5 kilometers away. The last leg of their journey. Relief evaporated. Rhodes scanned the approach with his binoculars. A warning crawl went up his neck. Vo was clever. He had anticipated their destination. His main force, at least 8 hunters, had dug in at the base of the only clear path up the mesa. They had heavy weapons, emplacements, and clear fields of fire. A frontal assault was suicide. The Calyptians had trapped them, so close to their goal. Rhodes swept the binoculars across the surrounding landscape, searching for another way. Cliffs dropped away on all other sides, but to the north, something else lay nestled in a deep valley at the foot of the cliffs. A large grove of pale, ghostly flowers, so numerous they looked like a patch of lingering morning mist from the distance. He remembered a footnote from a xenobotany survey, a detail he'd memorized before the mission, a throwaway detail that had seemed irrelevant at the time. Vale Lily Grove, endemic to Sylvan's northern valleys. Massive flora, noted for its pale, almost white petals and faint, shifting bioluminescence. Caution, emits a fine airborne pollen containing complex protein chains. The pollen acts as a mild allergen to humans, but causes severe sensory interference in certain alien species with specialized optical receptors. A plan formed. Vo blocked the path around them. The path through him was a death trap. So they would have to lure him in. They would make him walk into their trap. The plan required them to become the prey Vo had imagined them to be all along. Broken, desperate, and foolish. Jenks, Baker, Rhodes said, his voice low and urgent. I need a diversion, far side of their position. Make it loud, make it quick, then get the hell out of there. Draw their attention south. The 2 soldiers nodded and slipped away into the undergrowth. Rhodes turned to Madsen. You and I are going to lay a trail, the most pathetic trail anyone has ever seen. They worked. Rhodes used the butt of his rifle to score deep, stumbling tracks in the soft earth. Madsen used a synthesizer in a medkit, created a small amount of human blood, type O negative, the universal donor, and spattered it on a broad leaf next to the trail. As a final piece of bait, Rhodes took a nearly depleted power cell from his pack, scuffed it on a rock, and dropped it on the path. The trail led directly towards the one place a soldier would avoid, the box canyon that held the Vale Lily Grove. Minutes later, the sound of Baker's pulse cannon roared from the south, followed by the sharper crack of Jenks' rifle. Rhodes and Madsen scrambled for a high observation point, watching Vo's position through their optics. Several Calyptians turned to face the noise, their weapons raised. Vo barked an order, sending 2 of his hunters to investigate, but his own attention was elsewhere. He had spotted their trail. A Calyptian scout knelt, examining the blood on the leaf. Then the dropped power cell. He reported back to Vo, his gestures sharp. Rode could imagine the report. They bleed. They're exhausted. They're dropping equipment. Rax, Vo's second command, argued with him, pointing toward the valley, his posture hesitant. Rhodes remembered his tablet profile on Rax. A younger, more cautious hunter. The trail is clear. Too clear, he was probably saying. But Vo scoffed, gesturing dismissively. He pointed with his vibroglaive at the trail, then at the box canyon. A trap lay before him, but he believed the humans were the ones caught in it. It is the trail of broken animals, Rhodes could almost hear him saying. Their pathetic senses have failed them. They run into a dead end because they are blind. Now we end it. He gave the order. His entire force, the 5 hunters still with him, rose from their positions and moved, following the trail like predators closing in for the kill. Entering the Vale Lily Grove was like stepping into another world. The air grew still and cool, thick with a fine shimmering pollen that caught the light. It smelled of cold stone and a cloyingly sweet flower, a mix of nightshade and charged air. Madsen pulled a simple filter mask over her nose and mouth, passing one to Rhodes. Just a mild allergen, she confirmed, her voice slightly muffled. Might make a sneeze, but that's it. A dust settled in earnest. The lilies awoke. They were huge, their pale petals unfurling to the size of dinner plates, and they started to glow. A slow pulsing wave of colors emerged. Soft blues bled into deep violets, which shifted to shimmering silver. A gentle, disorienting, beautiful light show filled the entire grove. Baker and Jenks met them just inside the grove's entrance, having circled around after their diversion. Whew, they're coming, Baker rumbled. 5 minutes, maybe less. Good. The shifting ghostly light illuminated Rhodes' face. Positions. Comm silent. Hand signals only. We're relying on our eyes. Let's show them what shell sight can do. The team took positions within the eerie landscape. They used the shifting light inside as cover. The pulsing multicolored light created a constantly changing landscape of light and shadow. Rhodes settled behind a cluster of lilies whose glow shifted from indigo to lavender, his rifle resting on the pale petals. His heart beat a steady, cold rhythm. He waited for them at the entrance. They came as a unit, moving like victors. Vo was in the lead, his gaze locked on the clear life signs of the 4 humans huddled deep in the grove. He could see their heat, their fear, their exhaustion. He raised his vibroglaive, the signal to begin the final slaughter. The first sign was a flicker. The glowing, huddled form of Rhodes wavered, then split into 2 identical heat signatures, then 4. The vibrant life aura of the lily next to him fled, becoming a blinding sun of biological energy. The air ignited, the pollen catching and reflecting thermal energy in a chaotic, meaningless storm of light and heat. A Calyptian hunter behind him cried out, firing his rifle at a phantom that was only a pocket of warm pollen air. Another staggered back, shielding his face as his life sight turned into an overload of false positives, ghost images, and blinding sensory noise. They lost their composure, their movements becoming frantic and uncoordinated. Vo stared into the swirling vortex of sensory chaos, his large eyes wide. He was blind. A voice sliced through the cacophony of his own hunter's panicked shouts. Calm, clear, and chillingly close. The voice was Rhodes. What's wrong, hunt leader? It's much harder, isn't it? Living in a shadow play. Team Mustang struck from the chaos. To the blinded Calyptians, they were phantoms moving through the storm of false light. To each other, illuminated by the shifting multicolored glow of the lilies, they were perfectly visible. Rhodes gave a quick series of hand signals. his hand stark against the pulsing blue light of a nearby flower. Madsen, left. Jenks, right. Baker, center. On my mark. The Calyptians were blundering now, crashing into their giant flowers, firing their weapons wildly at sounds and phantom heat signatures. One of them activated a flashbang grenade. Rhodes saw the specific yellow-green hue of its activation light a full second before it detonated. He signaled. His team turned their heads, shielding their eyes. The grenade went off, its brilliant white flash only serving to further disorient the already blind Calyptians. Madsen moved through a patch of violet light, her rifle up. She fired twice. The noise swallowed the silent hiss of the stun rounds. 2 Calyptians collapsed. On the other side of the grove, Jenks used the strobing silver light of a cluster of lilies to his advantage. He appeared and disappeared like a faulty hologram, flanking a hunter who was spinning in circles, and brought the butt of his rifle down hard on the back of his helmet. Baker's approach was direct. He strode through the center of the grove, a dark silhouette against the spectral blooms. A Calyptian charged him, swinging a glaive blindly. Baker caught the weapon's haft in one massive hand, wrenched it from the hunter's grasp, and then dropped him with a single brutal punch to the jaw. In less than 2 minutes, only Vo remained. He stood alone in the center of the grove, his hunters lying unconscious around him. He swung his vibroglaive in a wide, desperate arc as he gasped for breath. "Rhodes!" he bellowed, his voice cracking. "Face me, you shadow dweller! Face me!" Rhodes stepped out from behind a lily, its light casting his face in shifting shades of blue. He held only his combat knife, its blade a dark silver in the gloom. Vo lunged, relying only on the sound of Rhodes' movement. He was still fast, still deadly, but Rhodes was elsewhere. He sidestepped easily, his movements guided by the shifting patterns of light and shadow on the ground. He anticipated Vo's footing. He used the uneven terrain illuminated by the flowers to lead the Calyptium off balance. Vo lunged again, a roar tearing from his throat. Rhodes ducked under the humming blade, his boot kicking out and hooking Vo's ankle. The hunt leader, already off balance, crashed to the ground. His vibroglaive flew from his grasp, clattering into the darkness. Rhodes was on him, a knee on his chest, the cold steel of his knife pressed against the soft fur of Vo's throat. The Calyptian froze, his amber eyes wide, seeing only a meaningless swirl of light. "You see the heat," Rhodes said, his voice low. "I see the light." He reversed the knife and brought the heavy pommel down on Vo's temple. The hunt leader went limp. The evac shuttle, a blocky Valkyrie-class lander, descended onto the bench's top, its landing lights cutting white cones through the deepening twilight. The whine of its engines was the most beautiful sound Rhodes had ever heard. Team Mustang moved, their exhaustion held at bay by the last dregs of adrenaline. Before he climbed the ramp, Rhodes paused. He walked back to the unconscious form of hunt leader Vo and knelt. From a pouch on his belt, he produced a single, perfect veil lily he had plucked from the grove. Its petals glowed with a soft blue light, ethereal and cool. He placed the flower on Vo's chest. "This is what defeated you. A flower. A color." He turned and boarded the shuttle. The ramp hissed shut, sealing them inside the sterile grey interior. As the ship lifted off, banking away from the mesa, Jenks stared out the viewport at the jungle below. The Veil Lily Grove was a faint, pulsing patch of otherworldly light in an ocean of darkness. "Wow," the kid breathed. "I think I'll always see the color green differently now." Madsen came and stood behind him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "None of us will, kid," she said. "None of us will." Rhodes sat in the HCA cruiser, stalwart Resolve's mess hall. The ship's low-life support hum a gentle thrum in his bones. He held a mug of cheap, bitter coffee in both hands, savoring its warmth. Across the table, Madsen, Jenks, and Baker played a quiet game of cards, their faces relaxed for the first time in days. His commanding officer, Major Kellerman, approached the table. He was a man with a face permanently etched with weariness. "Sergeant," Kellerman said, his voice gravelly. "A moment." Rhodes stood. "Sir, quite a mess you walked out of down there," the Major said, gesturing to the planet that filled the main viewport, a swirl of green and blue and white. "Funny thing, a few hours ago the Calyptian fleet pulled back from their blockade. They're screaming for emergency diplomatic talks. Seems one of their elite hunting parties went missing. Our long-range scouts just found him. An entire 12-man team, neutralized but alive, disarmed, unconscious, and left in a valley at the base of your extraction point." Kellerman fixed him with a sharp, inquisitive stare. "They're claiming an attack by some kind of unknown biological agent, a neurotoxin that attacks the optic nerve. The only clue their medics found was a single unknown flower on Hunt Leader Vo's chest." Rhodes met his gaze and remained silent. "I need your official report, Sergeant," Kellerman pressed. "What the hell happened down there?" Rhodes took a slow sip of his coffee. He looked at his team, at Madsen's steady hands, Baker's solid frame, Jenks watching the cards. He looked out at the vibrant and deadly world of color they had conquered. He turned back to the Major. "I'll keep it simple, sir.